Too many people think about their resume as like a historical document. You're not a historian, you're a marketer. So we need to be thinking like that, even if you aren't a marketer, right? I tell people, even if you're in finance or you're a data person, you can still market yourself in a non-sleazy way that makes you can talk about yourself in a way that's matter of fact and confident, but not arrogant. Because I got a lot of people that are like, well, I can't talk about myself because that means I'm not humble. When the reality is, you didn't do anything to achieve the gifts that you have. You have different gifts than I have. And so I can celebrate those gifts matter of factly because I've stewarded them. And there are things that I'm good at. And if I don't tell the employer and be an advocate for myself, who is going to be, right?
Yeah,
so I think it's
totally.
a really important piece.
Yeah. So maybe a good kind of last question around this, kind of landing the plane on this conversation. When you think about today, while we're still kind of locked up at home, we can't quite move around the way we want to.
Sure.
Are there any good best practices that we can use and incorporate that might help us make career pivots when it's difficult to do some of the traditional things?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing that I've been recommending people to do is, we were talking about networking a little bit, is to connect with real human beings. So I've actually encouraged some people to create their own networking pods. So what that means is you get people from different areas of your life. So maybe it's somebody that's a coworker, somebody that you worked with at a past company, maybe somewhere from your university, from your extracurricular activity, whatever it is, and ask them to bring somebody else and just have a couple questions that you ask everybody. I had a friend of this that did this actually in New York City when I lived there. We did it in person over dinner, but I love this concept that you can create your own pod and you can be the leader of that pod, but you don't have to do a ton of work about it, right? So you can just connect with other people. So that's one way to create a networking opportunity for yourself that people actually really enjoy and sign up for, because multiple people are doing it. And there's some level of connection too, that it doesn't feel like it's a totally blind situation. So that's one way that you can kind of move your career forward, learn about different types of careers as you're thinking about a career pivot.
I love that. And I can see those pods also serving a social function too. So,
oh, absolutely.
So you're getting that social connection, which I'm sure we all could use a little more of too.
All need.
Yeah, no doubt. This is great stuff, Jena. So is there anything around just the career search process that we haven't talked about today that we should have?
Yeah, I would say in the very beginning, and this is something that I actually love talking about in general, is you should be thinking from the very beginning of how to switch your mindset to that you're an asset to a company. Because when you start thinking like that from the very beginning, you're actually going to stand up for what you actually want. And that's going to translate through all the way through your marketing materials, how you show up to an interview. I always say interviews are 50% confidence and 50% content. And so I could probably convince you that I could find a job in like some XYZ type of industry just by the confidence that I say in explaining myself. And then I would say at the very end of that, the reason why we do the work in figuring out our mindset and getting ourselves correct there and understanding what we have to offer is that will translate through to negotiations, which I think is something that we don't like talking about because money's uncomfortable. But it's something that I believe if more people talked about, we'd have more people negotiating and actually having, that benefits your families, that benefits your communities. So I'm a big proponent of negotiating, and I actually believe that negotiating starts before you even get in front of somebody.
Yeah, so that obviously you have to understand your value to do that.
Yes.
But how do you figure out what you're really worth?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of pieces to the puzzle. So one, it's understanding what is the role. That's the first piece. Like, what does the role actually entail and what type of results will that provide for the organization? And ultimately, just to help some people, if you're like, I don't know where to start on my value that I bring or even what this role requires, right? It's either you're going to make a company money, you're going to save a company money, or you're going to make someone's life easier. It's one of those three things, whether you're a janitor, an entrepreneur, or a CEO, right? It's one of those three things. So that's a really great place to start for your own value that you bring, but also understanding what does the employer need. So understanding and doing some research on your own. LinkedIn Premium is a great place to kind of search for this, and PayScale is another great kind of website to see what are people getting paid for similar roles in your area geographically, to determine like, are we on the right page with what this employer is potentially going to pay me and what I should expect for them to pay me. And having that information kind of upfront is really helpful when you start to have conversations with companies. So having a ballpark is really important at the very beginning.
I love how simple but elegant you put that. Just understanding you're either going to make the money, save the money, or frankly, just make their life easier. It's going to be one of those three things. Yeah, I love it. I love it. It's so simple. And sometimes you combine those things, but every job's going to have one of those three elements in it.
Yes.
I love
And
it.
so like works for people that are new grads to senior executives to somebody that's maybe a mom and came back into the workforce. It's going to be one of those three things.
Yeah, yeah.
It works for everybody.